Hello, everybody. We are not expecting a huge crowd today because of the change in schedule and other stuff going on. But that's quite all right. We're going to soldier on, and we're going to get through the material. And then anyone who wants recording the material can always get access to it. But go ahead and just hang out for a moment. We're going to give people a couple of minutes to show, and then we'll get started. While people are waiting, we just put a poll up, and you're free to answer if you'd like to. We're going to be talking about ways to spend summers in order to make the most out of them. At the same time, taking a very sort of a balanced point of view towards all of this. Like, the answer is not do every single thing that you possibly can every single day and stay busy until you wear yourself out. That's not what we're trying to get across at all. So I want to start with just a very simple question. And that is, what do you typically recommend that a student does over the summer? You will see the poll show up in on the right side of the screen where the chat also is. Feel free to chat us at any time, interrupt us, doesn't matter. Just we have people manning the chat. There's four of us up here presenting, so there's plenty of people to answer questions. Looks like a tie, Willis.
I think so.
It's a dead heat. It's a dead heat.
I can't believe it.
All right.
It's a tough choice. It's a tough choice.
It is. What's your answer, Kate Manire? What do you typically? If I know you probably recommend more than one thing, but.
Yeah, I mean, there's my director of college advising answer, and then there's my human being answer.
What's the human being? What's the human being answer?
My human being answer is definitely have fun and recharge, especially now. And I think also director of college advising. I think that's incredibly important.
Yeah.
And also college visits, which should be
which
fun.
Are also fun.
Yeah, lots of overlap here.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. We're going to march forward. If there are any questions, of course, you're welcome to type them in the chat. We're going to go ahead and get started, though. First of all, introductions. So I am Scott Suzel. I am an instructor here at A-List, powered by Testive. I also develop curriculum. I was brought over here to actually build out our graduate program, which we historically haven't done. We've been primarily a high school and academic support for students even underneath high school. So anywhere really from 5th grade all the way up to 12th grade has historically been the students that we served. I have a long career designing and teaching curriculum for the LSAT, the GMAT, the GRE, and some other standardized tests as well for grad school. So I came over here to help build out their program, and we launched this year, and it's been really exciting. And we've gotten a lot of great new partnerships, and it's been a lot of fun. Willis, my man, Willis, born and bred, New York, Brooklyn. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Willis. Primarily, I actually want to know the most because you just left and came back. I'm really honestly, I haven't had a chance to talk to you about it. But how was Nicaragua?
Thank you for the intro, Scott. Quickly, guys. My name's Willis. I manage our institutional partnerships here at A-List. Been here for about 3 years, which is crazy. Time flies when you're having fun, as we all know. Been in education for quite a while. Most recently, as Scott just alluded to, I was living down in Nicaragua teaching English for a nonprofit English school, and just had the chance to go visit for the first time in 4 years, which was very, very crazy and an awesome experience. So yeah, glad to be back here and on with you all today for the webinar.
Moving on, we have Kate Manire as well. Kate Manire is our director of college advising, and she has a ton of experience. I with all my experience teaching, I am not I don't know as much about advising, and so I've learned an awful lot from Kate over the last year. There's so many things I had no idea about when it comes to the actual application process, since I was pretty much busy just teaching math and logic. But Kate, do you want to say hello?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned math because I was about to say that's something that I know very little about. So we intersect in different ways. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate. I have been in the field of education for now since 2012 or so. Started as a college advisor and have been kind of working in that capacity since then in some way or another. But I started at A-List in this role. It's been almost a year in 2 weeks. So super happy to be here and chat with you all.
And lastly, we have Tara Karch, who works for one of our sister organizations. We specialize in the admissions support and test prep and academic support space. And the company that Tara works for, Robin, specializes in social emotional learning. Tara, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Scott. I am Tara Karch. I am the SEL Client Services Manager and a Robin coach, and we do support mental growth and emotional growth through the use of coaches and a curriculum in schools. I'm also a former elementary school teacher for 14 years.
Oh my gosh, I did not know that. What grade did you teach?
I taught second, third, and fourth. Slowly worked my way up.
So we're from second to fourth. Those kids that's the fun age though. Second to fourth.
Yeah.
It's when they're at their best.
A lot of fun.
They know just enough to behave slightly, but they don't know enough to get into a lot of trouble. So the agenda for today, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that have changed in the market. We want to focus though on what on summers, what happens over the summer, what the how that actually plays out in the realm of equity and access and that kind of thing, and what that looks like. We also are going to turn it over to Tara. So she's going to talk a little bit about social and emotional learning support, and then we're going to talk about planning your summers out and the best ways to spend that time. We'll talk a little bit about admissions dates and deadlines, and what two specific groups can do this summer: the 10th and 11th graders who are going into this summer looking forward to continuing their high school careers in the fall, and then of course the 12th graders who are in a slightly different space heading into this fall. So and at the very end, we'll wrap up with some of the resources that are available to teachers and how you can implement them over the summers. So. Okay, first thing. So as far as like a little update goes, the big news in the last few months in our world is that the digital SAT is coming. So I want to talk briefly. I'm not going to dive really deeply into this stuff, but I do want to give a bit of an overview about what that means. So the digital SAT, I mean, it's probably not a surprise to anyone that a lot of schools have decided to go test optional. And so you are no longer required to submit a test score with an application. What no one really knew at the time is when that happened, and that happened, of course, in response to COVID, and it became increasingly difficult to find testing centers, and tests were getting canceled because proctors had COVID, and there were a lot of issues with testing, and so in the interest of, again, equity and access, a lot of schools made the decision, and there was kind of a this was kind of the trend anyways for a while. People have been talking about this for a while, kind of getting rid of the test as a requirement, and then it happened in response to COVID. So that kind of just became like the thing that pushed the schools over the edge to go ahead and making that decision. What we didn't know was what that actually meant. Does that mean you just never apply with a score? Is there any purpose to the test anymore? And we know a little bit more about that than we used to. We know now that the majority of students still getting into competitive schools are still applying with high scores. So that is certainly true. Another thing that's happened, a trend that's occurred, is that now students are using the test differently, and the SAT wanted to respond to that. So students are now using the test as an opportunity to display their ability instead of something that they had to do. And so a lot of times now, students, if they don't feel like their test score is advantageous to them, they will apply without submitting the test score. And if they do feel like their test score is where it should be to apply to a certain school, they'll go ahead and apply with the test score for that school. And so it looks like for the foreseeable future, that's the way things are going to continue to be. When they went test optional, really what they should have said is like, we're now test recommended. It's probably a better way to describe it. It's not a complete option. Yes, you can apply without a test score, but it doesn't mean that you're going to get a fair shake alongside all the students who have high test scores. A few of you will get in because you'll have an exceptional essay that'll just land in a certain way with someone on, the administration or a part of the admissions council. And so a few people will get in without test scores, but the vast majority of people do have high scores that they're submitting. So the SAT, in response to this, is like, well, the SAT, what are the problems with the SAT? It's too long. Too long, it takes too much time. It's difficult to administer because it just ship pieces of paper all over the country. And then students have to show up at a site, and there's all the issues with distributing and collecting tests and security and all that kind of stuff. So the SAT is now's the time. They've been thinking about this for a while. We're going to go digital, and we're going to change the nature of the test. So they're trying to position themselves as an opt-in test that students don't have to take, but want to take because it's short, it's easy, and it quickly allows them to demonstrate their abilities. What people are saying, so they did a bit of a beta test to try to figure out if this thing was going to work, and it went pretty well, according to the surveys of people leaving the test facility. Students who participated said it was great. It was less stressful than the current paper and pencil test, and that's the important thing, is that students like to take it so that they'll go and take it again. The moving forward, the digital SAT is again, it's an option to show your strengths. A quote at the bottom, this is Priscilla Rodriguez from College Board. A quote at the bottom is really interesting. In a largely test optional world, the SAT is a lower stakes test in college admissions. Submitting a score is optional for every type of college, and we want the SAT to be the best possible option for students. The SAT allows every student, regardless of where they go to high school, to be seen and access opportunities that will shape their lives and career. So, again, this is a press release type of language, but it's also true. I mean, this is, they knew that the next iteration of the SAT was going to have to respond to some of the criticism they received for access and equity, and they feel like they've done that. With the digital test, you can actually administer the test in more schools. It's much easier to reach some of the schools that they couldn't before, for people to actually get seats. People don't have to travel as far, and the test is, again, it's about, it's shorter. How is the test shorter? Well, here's how the test is shorter. It's adaptive. Adaptive tests are different than the paper and pencil tests you're used to taking. There are already adaptive tests out there, and it is not a matter of whether or not they're better. They are better. This has been established at this point. The GMAT is an adaptive test. The GRE is a form of adaptive test. These are graduate tests that I like to teach. But the idea is that, like, if I gave you and every other person in the world 100 questions, let's say you score in like the 95th percentile. Well, if you score in the 95th percentile, that's in the top 5% of test scores. My guess is that you and the other people in the top 5% are probably getting, a significant portion of all the questions right, and you always would. And so really, I'm evaluating you against all of the other people. 5% of everyone is still a lot of people. I'm evaluating you against all those other people on maybe the basis of like 8 to 10 questions. And that is not a very efficient way to get an accurate test score. So adaptive testing, what it does is adjust the difficulty of the questions that you're getting as you move to the test. So if you're doing really well, you start getting fed harder questions. This leads to some sort of like some weird outcomes, in that it's possible to potentially get more questions right than someone else, and end up with a different score based on however they, whatever algorithm they choose to sort of like track, where your score is. It's likely that the GMAT is a question by question adaptive test, which means that if you do really well on a question and you get the next question, you can't go backwards. Or if you have one you don't know, or you maybe like are not sure if you can do it, you can't skip it and come back. This makes the strategy involved in the test a lot different. The SAT, we don't think is going to be that way. The SAT is probably going to be similar to the way that the executive assessment runs, which it gives you small packets of questions, maybe 5 to 7 questions. And your performance based on that small number of questions is then you determine what the next 5 to 7 questions will look like. So you can still skip forwards and backwards a little bit. So, it's likely that that's what the SAT is going to look like based on what we've heard. How, what do you do about that? Well, starting in 2024, the SAT is going to be digital. So all the students are going to have to get used to taking a standardized test in the digital format. Our adaptive learning platform that we use has the option to take tests online. So it's a very good way for students to sort of get that muscle memory of taking a test online, which is a very different experience than paper and pencil. Paper and pencil, you can just sort of dive right in, and you watch students take tests, their heads probably don't rise the entire time. You know what I mean? It's 60 minutes, they're just down and scribbling, and then until they're done, and the pencil's down, and they're like, oh, thank goodness. And then they get a short break, and then it's on to the next one. But the point is that everything is focused on the paper. You can do all their sketching, diagramming, they can underline, they can do whatever they want to, and it's all right in front of them. Now in the digital format, students are put in this position where it's like, I can't annotate or sketch onto a screen, so I'm doing it on the paper, which means I'm moving my gaze up from the computer down to my paper, my scratch paper. That simple thing is actually pretty significant. It makes a really big difference in the way that students perform on the test if they're not practiced at it. And so the Testive platform is something that is already set up to allow you to do that. So there are multiple tests. There are 8 SAT tests in the system that allow you to take a digital version of the test and get practice like looking at a computer screen and answering real SAT questions. Sorry. So when you're using Testive for summer prep, it's basically runs itself. As you're working through the system, you will get, you get just like an adaptive test does. The adaptive learning platform gives you more difficult questions if you start getting a lot of questions right. And so it works very similarly. If you miss something, you can catalog it, you can review your question, you can watch videos, explanations. So it's an easy way to sort of catalog your progress with or without a tutor. You can use it to prepare. There's a question bank, apart from the test we already talked about, there's also a question bank with thousands of questions in it that let you practice. And students and teachers can benefit from it. Students get a calendar that kind of tracks their progress and lets them know how many questions they have planned on any particular day. Teachers can get access to all the analytics and metrics they may want for a class and for individual students. And these are the kinds of things that we can use to help us make decisions as we continue to progress. One student, their approach is never the same as another student's. The best approach isn't the same as anyone else's. Like, you need to make adjustments based on what your personal experience is, and Testive allows you to do that with the analytics provided that kind of let you figure out what your next move is and if you need to make any sort of adjustments to your prep. So moving on to that's sort of the market update is this whole digital SAT thing. That is one more stressor that's on students. The fact that the test is going digital, they're like, oh, I was just used to it being paper, and now I got to go digital. One more thing that's annoying. I already have to deal with my social media and everything else. So Robin is something that is filling a need now, because life isn't getting less complicated, it's getting more complicated. So Tara's here to talk a little bit about that and the impact that has on students and some of the things that she's learned. Go ahead, Tara.
Thank you so much, Scott. Yeah, as I'm sitting here listening to you, this is so fascinating to me. When I was in the classroom, I taught elementary school, and I was teaching 4th grade in Florida, and our state test, the big state standardized test at the end of the year, went from paper-based to computer-based. And it was a great source of stress. And the students really did have to practice with that format. That was invaluable. And as Scott said, the going back and forth from the screen to the paper. So there are so many extra stressors on top of, oh, I have to take a test. Now I have to take a test in a new format, and it's going to get harder as I'm going. So I'm just thinking about all these new stressors that are being added. So Robin does, as Scott said, we do fill a gap. We support the entire school community's emotional growth and mental wellness through coaching, through an online curriculum, and through a gamified daily practice that helps students build really supportive and healthy habits. And let's see. So we would love to pop out a poll question here. And before I dive any further into social emotional learning, to hear, thank you so much, Scott, is being happy or not overly stressed as important as academics? So would love to hear your thoughts on that. Do we think that being happy and not overly stressed is as important as academics? And while we're waiting for our yeses and nos to roll in, I see a yes. Kate, Scott, and Willis, if you even want to chime in with your thoughts, I'd be interested to hear them.
Well, my opinion, the two things are definitely intertwined. They're not mutually exclusive. And I'm huge into balance. Even when I'm doing preparation for grad level students, I advise them to take days off and to take time off and to never study more than a certain period of time. I mean, it ends up yielding better results. If you're unhappy, you're not going to be able to focus and you're not going to retain anything. So, so that one leads. If you're not, you have to take care of that first, and then you can study.
Yeah.
Thank
Totally
you so
agree.
much. I'm so happy to hear that. Yeah.
Fully agree.
Completely agree. I think it
Excellent.
also kind of plays into a little bit what we're talking about with our first poll, right? In terms of doing stuff for the summer. You got to have fun. You got to recharge. There are also things that you can do in tandem with that. But like Scott said, it's kind of hard to accomplish certain things academically when you're feeling stressed, when you're not happy, when you're not in that mindset. So I think the two go hand in hand. And excited to hear more, Tara.
I appreciate that, Willis. Thank you. I was thinking the same thing with that first question. If I were still in the classroom, I would be telling my students over the summer, have fun and recharge, but read a book. Maybe we could do those things together. Maybe reading a book will help us have fun and recharge. If you do nothing else, I would tell them, make sure that you're reading. But yes, if we're not feeling happy, we're not feeling safe, we're not going to retain anything if we're not feeling safe. That's really important. So at Robin, we recognize that need in schools, and we really work to help students develop social emotional learning skills. So these are nationally recognized skills, developing a healthy sense of who I am, connecting with others in a healthy way. There are 5 core competencies. Making healthy choices that support my wellness, establishing and maintaining responsible decisions, making sure that my decisions are really responsible and caring, and then feeling and showing empathy. So these are all things that we can actually develop in students by coaching them through real world skills. So they can be equipped with the tools to handle challenges by developing these skills. We bring coaches into schools virtually and in person. We work with groups of 200 to 400 students. And then I've also been working with Kate this year, which has been a real joy for me. We've been sending coaches in virtually to work with a smaller group of scholars in partnership with A-List to support these scholars with social emotional learning. And it's really fascinating to see how the students just embrace these sessions with the coaches. I think first and foremost, there is a sense of connection. They have this kind of safe space where they're able to connect with each other and then to connect with the coaches. And that leads to deeper sharing with each other and also deeper self-discovery, I would say. So we're really grateful to be here with all of you today. And we're really, really grateful to be doing the work that we're doing, supporting students, parents, and teachers, staff, and leadership in schools.
I forgot I was on mute. How many times has that happened? Everyone working from home has experienced that now. They all know it's like, and when you're on mute, you're pretty early, and you're like trying to unmute yourself before anyone calls you on it. You're like, hey, you're muted. And I'm like, no, I know that. I know. Just give me a second. Okay.
And you were successful.
I did. I got you guys. So moving on. So in a similar vein to all the social emotional learning stuff is what happens to students over the summer, and this got worse during COVID. But it became apparent that the virtual space yielded some differences in outcomes for students for lots of reasons. I mean, you get burnt out from being in a virtual space all the time, for one thing, and so we had issues with students sliding backwards in certain areas of school. Particularly if their teachers didn't necessarily take well to the virtual space. I mean, teachers were forced to do that all of a sudden after years and years of being practiced in classroom teachers. And as a person who's taught both versions, in-person classes and virtual classes, they are entirely different. It is 180 degrees from each other. So it's not necessarily the teachers or administrators' fault either. It just happened. And so the students are in a position now where they're not retaining information as well. And then the summer happens, and since it hasn't been, the stuff that they learned hasn't been cemented into their minds in the same way that it had previously, they end up sliding back even further during the summer. So it's interesting what we know about summer learning loss. So the 2 months of math learning loss for most students every summer, and 2 to 3 months of reading learning. A lot of people assume this is kind of, these are close together, but a lot of people assume that math is way worse than reading, and it's not. This is just on average, and the average student is going to slide backwards. I mean, again, so how long are you in school? You're in school for 8 months of the year, and then you lose 2 of them over the summer. So it's like you just went for 6. And so this happens over and over again every single year. And so the first 2 months of the next year are either spent climbing back to where you were, or it's even worse outcome is trying to build on fundamentals that aren't there anymore. And that is what gives students the sense that they're sort of lost, and it's very demotivating and can lead to other issues. So the other bullets here: student achievement scores decline more sharply for reading over summer break than math, and learning loss accelerates as you get older. So it gets worse and worse as you get closer and closer to graduating. So these are trajectories. So they start at kindergarten, but this gap continues to get to widen even as you get towards 12th grade. But summer reading changes a lot of things, and a lot of this is simply about access. So students with a certain kind of support have a tendency to do more reading over the summer. They have more people that they can discuss readings with, or they'll have like summer reading groups or that kind of thing. And this kind of helps them keep reading comprehension and being able to analyze arguments and interpret tone and all those kinds of things. These are lifelong skills. Math is one thing. Like if you forget how to solve a system of linear equations, I can reteach you in about 3 hours. It is difficult to teach anything that's related to reading and reading ability in a very short period of time like that. It's a lifetime of skills that sort of that accumulate over the course of your academic career. So it's really, really important that students have access to the kind of material that allows them to to keep those skills polished during the summer so they don't slide backwards. Before we move to a guide to summer planning, because this is a pretty good segue into how to spend your summer and what you should spend your summer doing, I just want to talk a little bit more about the equity gap there. So obviously students come from vastly different economic backgrounds and vastly different home situations, and the students who have the support are going to end up making strides in the summer because they end up in a place where, I'm finally in a place where I can work at my own pace. And, I'm not in a group, I'm not with a group of students. I have a very small number of people I'm working with, or maybe I have a tutor that I'm working with for the entire summer. And those students have a tendency to accelerate their progress over the summer. Students who aren't fortunate enough to come from those kinds of backgrounds don't have access to that kind of support, and they are the ones who end up sliding back slightly. And so the difference between those two things occurring, with some people leaping forward and some people sliding back slightly, is what creates these big divides between different groups of people from different socioeconomic backgrounds and otherwise. So it's an interesting thing to keep an eye on. But there are things to do that you can do to kind of increase equity, and companies like ours are making strides to try and do that, and regardless of background, provide people with resources that allow them to keep up. So what does your summer look like? Well, not just summer, just your entire prep process is actually here on this graph. So we have sophomores and you have juniors, primarily are the ones who are looking to prepare for tests and to apply to college. And so here's a lot of the main deadlines. You can see at your sophomore year, the ideal prep window actually starts in April and kind of goes through that first summer between your sophomore and junior year. There are things a lot of students haven't even seen in school yet that are on the test at that point. And so we don't expect anyone to hit their highest score. It's just the ideal time to start your preparation, because you continue testing all the way through the fall and into your the spring of your junior year, and potentially even into the fall of your senior year is the very, very last chance that you have. So there's a long, long window of testing opportunity, and it is in a student's best interest to test multiple times. These are not graduate tests where they get, a school gets every single score that you from every test you've ever taken, you are directing tests out. And so there's no disadvantage whatsoever to taking the test multiple times. In fact, if anything, it's nothing but an advantage. One, because it's not typical that a student's highest score is the first time they take a test. That just makes sense. That's common sense. The other thing is that a lot of schools super score. So you can super score your ACT or SAT score and pull different scores together and create a higher score. And that only happens if you have multiple tests under your belt. So, Kate, Manire, anything you want to add about the admission stuff that might be on this timeline? I guess this is primarily test prep. But there is a little thing that says app deadline start. So you can speak a little bit when that happens.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of overall just mental well-being, I think the further down you get into that August, September, October, November of senior fall and you're taking the SAT, I mean, again, it's kind of going back to like the importance of resting and recharging. The more stressed you are about doing well on a test, it's possible that you won't do quite as well. So I think this long runway of preparation is really, really key. And yeah, always keeping in mind that schools don't see everything, right? They see only the best of you. So that should be a confidence builder. But we can go into also we'll go into more of the admissions overall timeline in a second.
Yeah, to your point, Kate, with all of my students, if I get them early enough, I always try to build into their preparation, build in a backup test. Every single time, not because they necessarily need the second test, but because knowing that they have another chance to get the score that they need allows them to perform better on the first test. And so that's consistent, whether it's SAT, ACT, or graduate level tests like the law school admissions test and others. So how important is each piece of your application? So this has changed slightly because of the new test optional environment. The most important thing is still your GPA and your grades from high school. Grades in college prep classes and the strength of curriculum, all those things are basically associated with the same thing. It's like your GPA is what it is, but what does it mean? And so they look at the other two things, your grades in college prep classes and particularly the strength of your curriculum, to figure out what your 4.5 GPA or your 3.8 GPA really, really means, because not all GPAs are created equal for a variety of reasons. So as we move past that red line, though, these are all the things that students who are even juniors can still do to impact their chances of admission. Your GPA, by the time you hit your senior year, is pretty much locked in. You can alter it slightly, but you don't have a lot of power over that. These other things are completely in front of you. So your admissions test scores, you can still blow the admissions test out of the water. Essays and writing samples are even more important now than ever. Now that test scores have been slightly de-emphasized, the essay has been emphasized. Recommendation letters, demonstrated interest is something also that has changed, and Kate's going to talk more about that. And of course, extracurricular activities as well. All of those things are still important, but there's been a shift to the right as far as where the importance lies. Grades are still most important, but there definitely has been an increased importance in all of these other softs, as we call them, to the right of that red line. College application timeline for juniors and seniors. Kate, take it away.
Thank you. All right, so we'll go over this really quickly. I'm sure that you all are pretty familiar with this kind of timeline overall. And what we're going to do is actually really focus on the summers. But this is an overall overview. Obviously, spring of junior year, you want to have that SAT settled, and then you're going to plan your summer. We'll talk about that in a second. Basically, it all kind of kicks off in earnest starting summer and August of junior year. That's when you start assembling all of your application materials, and then it becomes essentially a wild dash to the finish, right, until January, which is when regular decision deadlines are. But let's take a little bit more of a look just into the summers. So we kind of broke this down into two categories. First, we're going to look at 10th and 11th graders because there's a lot of overlap there. And I'm really going to focus on one concept, which is that of demonstrated interest. I had just mentioned that demonstrated interest is actually growing in importance. And obviously that's because of enrollment declines that are happening across colleges due to COVID. Essentially, obviously, a lot of students have really struggled with committing to go to university, especially when it's like, well, I'm going to be in virtual classes. What's that really going to look like? Is that the college experience that I want? And so colleges are not yielding as much of a student body and as much enrollment as they used to. So measuring demonstrated interest is a really good way for colleges to be able to just say, okay, the student will actually attend if they are accepted into our school. In terms of what you can help your students kind of prepare for when it comes to demonstrated interest, there are a couple of things. I think the really big thing is going to be helping them schedule out some college visits over the summer. I know we had said that college visits was kind of one option of what to prioritize over the summer. And definitely it would be a great thing to do. Colleges certainly track college visits, and they also look at virtual information sessions. They see if you've attended a virtual visit. They see if you've opened their emails. But also additionally, you can guide them in creating meaningful contact with admissions officers at each school. I think that is also a really great thing to do. It puts kind of a face to a name of an applicant really early on. So certainly another really great supportive thing you could do for your students before they go off on their summers is to give them a couple of email templates. One starting off point that I wanted to hand out to everyone who's here is just a college visit pro and con worksheet. And at the very, very bottom, there are also a couple of questions that are really about like, how are you making contact with the school? How are you demonstrating that interest? If a student can go visit a campus, even if it's virtual, and then like make sure they do a couple of different action items to show that they are really interested in the college, then that is a summer well spent in terms of admissions and can really, really up their chances. So I'm going to put out this handout here.
Already shared it, Kate.
Oh, thank you, Scott. I was like, where'd it go?
I do have a question though. So with
Sure.
regard to like demonstrated interest, right? This has to do with logistics, and everything's more data driven now. So I'm assuming the schools at some point are like, it really is. It's in our best interest to know if someone's going to actually come here when we send out acceptance, because it's very, very difficult for them to determine or predict how many seats they're actually going to fill, and you end up with spoilage, right? They have more
Right.
seats empty than they've actually have people that actually end up attending, and that costs us money, right? So demonstrated interest is one way of them ensuring the people that they send acceptance to actually come. What about things like early applications and early decisions? Is that becoming an increasing part of in other words, are the seats that are sort of set aside for those students applying early, are those growing? Are there more people who are accepted that way now than there used to be, so that they can ensure people are coming to schools?
That's changing. Actually, what's really interesting is that, like, if you look at the data comparison between early action and early decision, listen, your chances go up with early decision. And I don't think they're really increasing those seats. But it's binding, so you just get less applicants. So certainly that's the best strategy, is to find a school that you really love and just say, this is it, I'm going to apply early decision, and then you get in and then you're done by December, unlike probably a lot of your classmates who are probably waiting for decisions until end of April, right? Or mid-April. Early action is a great thing to do in general, just for your peace of mind, but that's becoming less and less advantageous. Colleges have kind of kept the same model, like if they have early decision, they'll keep early decision. Some colleges have added a second early decision round. So that's one thing that has changed recently, not since COVID, that was a little bit before, but we're seeing more and more colleges actually add ED2. So that would be actually more towards January 1st. So it's the same deadline as regular decision, but it's, hey, do you want to just commit to going to the school if you get in? You find out at the same time as regular decision, but it's binding. And that is a change that's happened. Interesting.
Yeah, I know from speaking to students that that's something that more and more of them are telling me that they're interested in doing. So yeah, it's just it's an interesting trend.
Yeah, it's great. It's wise as long as you can, really say with confidence that you would be really, really happy at that school.
Yeah.
And I'll just take you were mentioning data tracking and all that. I just wanted to show you guys a quick sample of basically what a college looks at when it comes to a student's demonstrated interest and a student's profile. Actually, see at the very bottom, activity history. It's kind of cut off here, but you can see exact dates that they open an email. The students open an email from a college. You can see what links they clicked into and when and how long they stayed. So it's really becoming like a business sort of data analytics, data-driven approach to recruitment, because that's how they've got to make sure that they are going to get those butts in those enrollment seats, right? So I just thought this was interesting because it's just wild to me that they are tracking it that heavily. But for your information and for you, it's really good to encourage your students to like click into things. It takes 2 seconds and it's something that they really notice. Yeah, so in terms of after sophomore, after junior year, I think the best thing to do is really explore. You don't have to be there physically in person. You can do a lot of virtual visits. There's so many things you can learn by clicking into their website and opening their emails and emailing admissions officers. And so even if you're not there with your feet on the ground, you have the advantage and the ability to actually like really investigate the school and learn a ton about it, which is good for you and for your chances in the college.
Yeah, Kate, you taught me a lot about this stuff, and I had a student, I have a few students that told me this. They would go on college visits, and then they would come back, and then I would say, "Oh, how was your college visit?" It was amazing. I loved it. I met all these cool people, and I asked, "Did anyone from the school at all had any idea that you were there?" They're like, "Well, no, I didn't like." I walked to campus and I met other students and I talked to people, and I was like, and so I now know that this is a bad thing. If you're going to go take a college visit, make sure everyone knows that you're there.
Yes, shout it from the rooftops.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is funny because that handout that we gave, it didn't used to have that little blurb at the bottom about, what outreach did you do at the school? It was really more for the students' benefit, but because demonstrated interest is becoming more of a thing, we want to really like push kids and our students to make sure that they do make some contact points. And luckily there's so many ways to do it. So obviously I think one thing that is becoming really, really important, and this is something that like when I came to A-List, I really wanted to ensure that students are not just, essentially getting into their school and then we're done and we're leaving you alone and you guys figure it out from there, right? I think life, goes on way, way past college. It's such a big and important time in kids' lives, but you still have to get to enrollment, like get to that first day on campus, and you have to thrive in college. So I think it's almost like sort of an in-between of like this test prep and then what Robin does, which is like, how can we make students who are going to be able to thrive and like function and do really great on campus? So obviously anyone who works in education is aware of the concept of summer melt. And if you could actually go to the next slide, there's a really good description of it. Thank you. So the surprisingly common scenario in which high school graduates apply or accepted and say they plan to enroll in college but don't. This is definitely an issue of privilege. Certainly like a lot of students who are underrepresented or don't have the finances or the resources, they suffer the most from summer melt. And so for us, it's super important that we try to figure out like ways that we can help students get all the way to that first day of college, continue getting those scholarships so they can go to the next year. So one really interesting project that came up, it's through Harvard University's Strategic Data Project back in the mid-2010s. They actually devoted just a few hours per student over the summer between senior year and freshman year of college, just to kind of helping them with like the logistics of getting on campus. And I think that is something that takes very little effort, but seemed to have a lot of impact in this project. If you go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about some of the benefits that occurred. Number one, you'll see that a lot of the students, like what the students received help in, financial aid forms, obviously, that's a really big thing. That's an intimidating thing. If you've ever done your taxes, you know that like chill on your skin that you get when you start thinking about it. Kids get that too. Helping with transcripts and sending logistical things, just being that support system for them. And then obviously, look, like there's a lot of pre-college anxiety, so there's support that you can give in that way too. So I think the point of all of this is that, like, as an educator, you all know that your job's not done, right? Once your student graduates, like, it's really important to give them the resources to, like, set themselves up for success, and even just a few hours of contact over a couple of months will really go a long way.
And this may be somewhat anecdotal, but my experience from talking with students about this particular issue, it seems that a lot of it happens because one, there are so many hoops to get through and hurdles to get over. And if you're a first generation college student, your parents didn't go through that process and aren't able to help you with a lot of that stuff. So you got to get your help elsewhere if it exists. And for students who are not first generation college students, then at the very least, your folks are used to the concept of applying for financial aid and all those other things, all those other ducks you have to get in a row before you end up attending. And so that is sort of one thing that I've noticed, and I think what can end up leading to people just making the easier decision to just not go. The other issue is where students come from economic hardship. It's actually, the price tag of school itself is actually difficult to rationalize, and it's difficult for them. Sometimes they're making decisions they feel like they're making decisions for their families. They don't want to put that kind of financial pressure on their families in order to go. And so those are a couple of things that I've noticed just from speaking with students that are part of some of the access programs that I work with.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And I feel like also one really, really big thing is that, when in terms of information and how it kind of translates, you see statistics. If you're not first generation college student, the amount of, like, information that comes from friends and other friends' parents and, like, other families in your community is so much larger and so much more vast than if you're a first generation college student. You really don't have, like, the same network. And so I think the objective of this project is to sort of be that network for those kids. And you can certainly do that too. Like, there are definitely ways to, increase those channels of information.
Oops, sorry.
That's it.
Thank you, Kate. We're gonna transition into some of our partnerships and things that we've done with schools that we partner with in order to try to sort of alleviate some of these issues. Willis, as the person who manages those relationships, knows the most about them. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to Willis.
Wonderful. Thank you, Scott. So again, like Scott said, I'm just going to highlight a couple of our programs here. Some of our longer standing partners, school partners, nonprofit partners that have been with us for a while, that have gotten different types of programming with us. And as a result of the switch to the digital SAT, post-COVID learning loss, right? They've kind of reached out to us in seeking more support, more ways that they can provide support for their students, particularly over the summer. So I know that Scott alluded to our adaptive learning system called Testive a little bit earlier here. So that is basically what we see as a perfect tool to provide students with over the summer, right? It can be as asynchronous as students want it to be. They can have access to a platform where they're going to be able to have access to a practice question bank, practice tests, very detailed practice test score reporting. So again, it's going to be a great way for them to, try and get as much momentum as they can over the summer during those key testing months that we outlined a little bit earlier. So in 2021, Manhattan Hunter Science just basically used us to provide live SAT prep for their students. We provided a teacher, had a schedule, a couple practice tests throughout the course of the year that was in person. 2022. Basically, we decided to give them, a much more expanded resource pool, being that Testive platform. So what they've done is, in addition to that live SAT prep, they are also allowing their students access to the Testive platform. They've started off using it already, and it's going to be something that students have access to throughout the course of the entire summer. So again, it's going to be a great way to combat a lot of the things that we've been talking about so far on the webinar here. In addition to that, another key piece I think that's important to touch on is that not only are we providing these resources for the students, We're also doing professional development with their teachers and with their coaches. The reason why we think this is important is because once the SAT becomes fully digital and people are using these resources, it's going to be, they're going to have a hand up on other places, other schools, if they have a fluency and comfortability with the online test, process of testing, doing practice online. So that's what we're providing, right? Teachers are going to have a head start. They're going to hit the ground running once this actually becomes a virtual test, because they've been doing virtual test prep for a couple of years.
Hey, Willis, I have a
So I
question.
think that's important.
Are the students getting access to Testive after they take the class in the spring, or are they get it in the summer prior to the spring where they take the class?
Yeah, so it's actually going to be both. It can be designed and customized really in whatever way these schools want. This particular program, we've gotten them signed up on the platform so that students can access it. Currently they're meeting once a week with their teachers anyways, but it's also that access once the class stops at the end of the school year. They're going to have access to the platform throughout the course of the summer so that it eliminates a lot of that stagnancy and a lot of those, learning loss months that we outlined before, so that, come fall, they're ready to go. They're ready to go ahead and, take that second test, take that third test, and haven't experienced those couple of months of learning loss. Wonderful. Okay, so just quickly moving on. Sorry, I know we may be a little short on time here, but moving on to just quickly another one of our partners here, Pilgrim Rest Missionary Baptist Church. We've been working with them since about 2015. Again, they utilize our resources. They actually are in Alabama, so we send materials to them, books, online lesson plans, different resources for teachers to teach their own program. And as a result, they reached to us, right? They used us as their support system and reached out to us asking if there was any way that they could provide any additional support for their students over the summer. So for us, that was perfect, right? A very, very, very convenient way to introduce them to the Testive platform, right? This is just going to be another way that they can, support their students. They're not going to be able to be, providing teachers over the summer for the students, but they were very concerned about the fact that when students come back for the fall, particularly after, a couple of very tough years academically, they wanted to combat that any way that they could. So again, this is just going to be a way for places that we work with to utilize this Testive platform in a way that sets them up for great success come fall.
Willis, thank you very much. I'd like to interject really quick. As a person who teaches these classes sometimes, I just want to say that when a student has opportunity to get access to questions and practice a little bit, first of all, they can figure out what they don't know. And there are certain things they don't know that they can teach themselves. And if they know what they could already teach themselves, and then everything that's left over is the things that they need a little bit of help with, when they come armed with that information into one of my classes, it is so much more effective than it would be if they had no exposure to that stuff whatsoever, and all of a sudden are walking into my class for the very first time, having their first exposure to the test at all on day one. It's night and day, the difference. And so the material support outside of any sort of formal training or class that happens is incredibly important for that reason.
Yeah, that's a super, super good point, Scott. Thanks for highlighting that. And I think, it kind of even just goes into right here, it's simply put, why is this something that we're doing? Why is this something that schools and nonprofits and different types of organizations are concerned about? Losing momentum over the summer is something that's always been around, right? This is not a new concept. It's something that students, teachers, administrators have always dealt with. However, in kind of a, post-COVID world or moving towards a post-COVID world, I think people are very cognizant of the fact that they want to be able to try and, take up some of that lost time that they lost, right? So combating this learning loss that students have experienced over the past couple of years is particularly important this year, and for just any students that have experienced this. So that's something that we've seen a lot with a lot of the different schools that we work with. Just these two places that I've highlighted. A big thing that they made sure to communicate with me was that this is something that arose because students talk to them about these issues, right? This is something that students are aware of, and want to team up to see how they can best combat this. So yeah, that's again just kind of a quick little insight into what these two programs have done, how they've utilized the Testive platform, And also, I'm sure this will be touched on at some point at the end, but just wanted to quickly let everyone here know that everyone that's currently in this room is going to get a free opportunity to access the Testive platform for 30 days. I also will be super happy to do a little demo with everyone here at any point. So there'll be a link to access that at some point at the end here, but just wanted to let you guys know about that as well.
So another partner, Rising Stars. And Kate, you probably you probably know the most about this partnership. So I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, totally. I think for us, like, we wanted to highlight a couple of outcomes, especially in some of our partners who we work really closely with, both in prep and advising. So here is just a little bit of, here's some numbers basically for, first of all, our SAT stats for Rising Stars last year. First of all, Rising Stars is like a wonderful nonprofit. They're based in Long Island. It's actually really geared towards young basketball players who need a lot of financial support. They get full scholarships to great schools, but they still need that support in SAT prep and in college advising. So you'll see we've gotten engaged students get a lot of great results. If they come and attend and participate in class, they'll get like 70% increase, big increase in open opportunities for colleges, 176 more colleges that are in range for these students after having taken our SAT class. And then additionally, we also provided some college advising support, some acceptances from this past year. One student got into Williams, got a full ride. Another student got full funding to Cornell University. And then also we had admissions to Bucknell, Brandeis, SUNY Binghamton, Xavier, a whole long list. So super talented kids. And then I think with the right resources, they were really able to have some amazing outcomes.
Yeah. Something interesting, I'm going to go just back a couple slides real quick, is to talk about this, the available colleges for engaged students after the program. So the interesting thing about this statistic is how influential score increases can be when you're anywhere near the middle of the curve. So you have a normal distribution curve of test scores, right? They're all kind of centered around the median, but they're so compressed, and the vast majority of students are all scoring a sort of pretty narrow band in the center, that increasing your score by 70 points yields you basically are jumping past the average scores for 176 universities with just a 70-point increase, because there are so many schools whose average scores are somewhere in that center range, that center band. And so, not everyone is like trying to figure out if they're going to go to Cornell or Harvard, or, the vast majority of students are somewhere in the middle. And having the opportunity to apply to the very best schools on their list makes all the difference in the world. Like, you want to end up somewhere you're happy. And, adding 176 schools to your list of possible options is a big deal. Even with something that is, may at first blush seem fairly modest, and 70-point increase is actually very substantial.
Yeah, the amount of opportunity that goes from, say, like a 1330 to a 1400, the amount of colleges and the amount of funding, scholarship funding that opens up for you is really, really significant.
All right, we got a couple minutes. We have 1 minute left. I know Tara has a student need to go see, so we'll finish it up with the very last slide. First of all, if you want to talk to any one of us, we're happy to do that. Willis can talk to you about institutional partnerships. Kate can speak to you about anything that's to do with admissions. If you would like to book a free consultation, you certainly can. You can also just always call us or email us and book a consultation that way. But if you'd like, we're always here to help and here to talk. And we can something we spend a lot of time doing during these consultations is helping people come up with a plan, like a workable, actionable plan that takes place over the course of whatever timeline it is that we're looking at, whether the endpoint is a test date or an acceptance. We can help you sort of understand the best way to approach all these things and set important deadlines for you. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you also Tara for visiting us during the webinar today. It was a pleasure to have you. Willis and Kate, until next time. Thanks again, everyone. I hope that we provided some useful information. Like I said, if we didn't answer something or provide information that you wanted, just talk to us, and we're happy to do it then. So we run these webinars regularly, so try to catch us again. But otherwise, enjoy the rest of your evening and have a great week, everyone.
Thank you all. Happy summer.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everybody.